I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Broadcom blows away estimates with quarterly numbers that beat across the board. What the Singapore-based chipmaker's success means for future acquisitions in the United States. Plus, the FBI now warns that Russian hackers are attacking the U.S. power grid, targeting some of the country's most sensitive infrastructure. And a Bloomberg scoop, Walmart may have gone too far trying to close the gap with Amazon. Details from the whistleblower's court case that accuses America's biggest retailer of cheating. First, to our lead. Broadcom shares are little changed in late trading after reporting first quarter earnings that were in line with analyst estimates. This puts pressure on the chipmaker CEO, Hock Tan, to show how the company can continue its growth spurt after its ability to make an acquisition in the U.S. was dealt a very serious blow. Joining us now to break down the earnings, Bloomberg stock reporter Abigail Doolittle. So Broadcom and Qualcomm not happening, but what do the results tell us?
Well, you're right about that deal not happening. So that puts all of the focus on these results. And for the first quarter, they had actually already pre-announced. But even with that upside pre-announcement, they beat the first quarter earnings estimates. They put up $5.12 per share versus the estimate of $5.04. But because of the pre-announcement, all focus, as is often the case, on guidance. And it's solid. For revenues, they're looking at $5 billion for the second quarter, their fiscal second quarter, plus or minus $75 million. Plus, relative to gross margins, those beat. They're giving a range of up 65% to up 67% versus the estimate of 64.3%. That being said, we see the stock is down just a little bit in after hours. A piece of that could be that this guidance is considered to be in line. This story has been going so strong. They've really been executing and performing well. Investors may just have wanted a little bit more.
What is driving the strength here?
Well, they have a lot of different businesses going on, but one piece of it certainly is the complexity for 4G. That really is helping them out from a top line standpoint. And then relative to earnings, they execute very well, lots of discipline. So that certainly helps on the bottom line there, Emily.
So let's talk about the bigger picture and, what Broadcom does next. Do they try to make another acquisition? This has, after all, been a very acquisitive company.
You're right about that. They've made several acquisitions not so long ago. Now, after the failed bid for Qualcomm, after President Trump basically blocked it, the possibility here or the likelihood, if they continue to make acquisitions, and again, you mentioned it, you're right on, they certainly have an acquisitive nature, could be to go for smaller tuck-in types of deals, non-threatening, Maxim, Analog, Microchip, those have all been mentioned. However, it's worth noting that each of these companies, it's not like they're tiny companies. Each is meaningful enough that perhaps other issues could come up, but certainly not of the size of Qualcomm. So stay tuned. Perhaps we'll be hearing about another potential deal here in the works anytime here in 2018, Emily.
All right, Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us. We are going to stick with Broadcom and the drama surrounding its block takeover of Qualcomm, which continues to dominate the headlines. So what does it all mean for consolidation in the broader chip industry? Joining me now, Bloomberg Gadfly's Alex Webb. So, Alex, what's your take on this from across the pond?
The thing I thought was pretty interesting is we saw some of the numbers in the most recent quarter were quite impressive. They, of course, highlighted the bottom line, which beat even their own expectations. And it's that focus on cost and cost control which has really stymied them when it came to the Qualcomm deal. They were sort of hoisted by their own petard because the concentration on cost means that they are expected generally to spend less on R&D, and that cutting of R&D expenditure, which might have been expected at Qualcomm, was perceived, it seems, by the administration as a risk to U.S. technology development. So that focus on cost, which is giving them pretty good numbers right now, is also the thing which might stymie their growth expectations through acquisitions going forward.
What do the Broadcom results say about iPhone sales?
Well, Broadcom is, of course, a big supplier to Apple. They supply, the understanding is things such as the chip used in Apple Pay and also in the wireless charging. And we saw then that the quarter just gone was pretty good, and that suggests then the demand over the Christmas quarter was strong. But going forward into the current quarter, the current calendar quarter, and fiscal quarter, of course, that demand seems to be dropping off. And that does posed questions about the super cycle. The expectation not just that the iPhone X would provide a sales bump this year, but then extending into the subsequent 2 years, there would be big demand for the iPhone and drive the stock higher.
So, obviously, this ties into, what we're expecting to come with the iPhone later this year. We've been reporting, new models coming in the fall. What sort of demand are we expecting to see?
I mean, that's obviously the trillion-dollar question, literally. I think the thing that you have to give Apple credit for is that this hardware demand and therefore the numbers they're able to deliver, which you can see a sort of read through from Broadcom, that does translate into service demand. Of course, if you have an iPhone, you're far more likely then to be spending money on the App Store, for instance. And that, of course, in turn builds stickiness. If you've downloaded apps onto your phone, you're going to buy the next iPhone. But it seems that the upgrades coming later this year, as our colleague Mark Gurman and Debbie Wu have reported so ably, it seems possibly slightly incremental increases, not big blockbuster increase this year.
So what do you see as next for both Broadcom and Qualcomm, which, the latter of which is involved in lawsuits around the world, including with Apple?
Well, Broadcom, as Abigail pointed out, I think there is a very good chance they're going to be looking to do more acquisitions. It seems they will continue to re-domicile themselves in the US, which might make some of those deals a little bit easier. The reasons we just said is not necessarily that they are perceived as a threat in and of themselves. They are not a threat to national security. It's just that the way they affect companies might affect national security. And therefore, depending on the deals they look to do, some of those acquisitions may not be as crucial as Qualcomm is. The thing is, the crucial part of the Qualcomm deal is that they are going to be quite essential in things like 5G. And the US does not want to be losing out in that space, because then they have to buy chips from perhaps Chinese companies, and that is perceived as a national security threat. So Qualcomm going forward, they seem to be carrying on the same trajectory. They are investing heavily in R&D. The question now is whether Broadcom itself can find the sort of acquisitions which will drive the growth and keep shareholders happy.
All right, Broadcom shares down a little over 1% after hours. Bloomberg Gadfly's Alex Webb, thank you so much for weighing in. Sticking with earnings, Adobe also reported results after the close, sales totaling just over $2 billion in the first quarter, a new record for the company. Digital media revenue came in at $1.46 billion, and its full-year earnings outlook topped the most bullish forecasts. Coming up, the U.S. is sanctioning Russia over its social media meddling in U.S. politics. Who was hit hardest and why? We will discuss. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. Billionaire investor Peter Thiel is bullish on Bitcoin, the heartland, and President Trump. Speaking at the Economic Club of New York on Thursday, Thiel said Bitcoin will become more important, squeezing out Ethereum and other newer cryptocurrencies. His venture firm Founders Fund has been quietly buying Bitcoin since 2012. Thiel also lavished praise on the president for his ability to reframe issues and said U.S. heartland cities are ripe for innovation and good for startups because housing prices are more reasonable, and gave this prediction for the 2020 race.
I'm not sure I can speculate on this better than anyone else in this audience would be able to.
But you know him. You know what his priorities are.
I think that if he runs again, he will get reelected, and so he'll make a judgment if he thinks he can get reelected, he will run, and if he runs, I think he will.
Well, a dire warning from the FBI claiming that Russian hackers are mounting an assault on key parts of U.S. infrastructure. The Bureau says that the hackers have taken aim at air transport facilities, parts of the U.S. electric grid, water processing plants, and more. Energy Secretary Rick Perry said cyber attacks are, quote, literally happening hundreds of thousands of times a day. All of this coming as the Trump administration slapped sanctions on Russian agencies and individuals indicted over meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. For more, I want to get to Washington, D.C., where our Bloomberg national security reporter Nafisa Saeed is standing by. Nafisa, this all sounds terrifying. What exactly is happening here?
Right. So there was a lot of news about Russia and hacking today. So we break it down first with what happened around this alert from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. So they're saying that dating back to at least March 2016, Russian hackers were targeting U.S. critical infrastructure. And as like you mentioned, that ranges from what they're calling aviation to the electrical grid to nuclear power plants, to all services that we all rely upon. So, what actually was targeted, we're still trying to figure that out. But, in terms of what individually parts of those sectors. But what we're seeing is that, these were kind of classic spear phishing attacks that we're used to hearing. But at the same time, some of the strategies of how they got into these networks has been revealed by the federal government. They're saying that the Russians targeted what they're calling suppliers and third-party vendors. They jumped from that to the major networks, of these facilities. And then once they have the credentials, they can log on and gain access to the control systems for these facilities. So it's pretty wide-ranging in terms of, the different sectors that the Russians apparently were targeting in the U.S.
So how successful have these attacks actually been, and how disruptive to these facilities?
So the Department of Homeland Security and FBI have not come out and said how successful these attacks are. And so that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. But at the same time, we know what they've said around, the targeting of elections. So we can just, try to surmise what they were actually able to get. So we're going to be trying to figure out whether they were able to breach into both government facilities and privately owned, or the utilities. And were they able to exfiltrate and take data? Were they able to gain access and then, start running some of these facilities remotely? So I think these are the kinds of questions that we're going to have. And the alert was put out today, and it didn't necessarily say that, this has ended. And so it's something to be on the lookout for, both for these major facilities, but also some of the smaller vendors that are supplying to them.
Meantime, the U.S. is sanctioning a Russia-based troll farm, 2 intelligence services, other Russian citizens, and businesses tied to U.S. election meddling. Tell us more about who these are targeting and why.
Right. So today, the U.S. Treasury targeted the Internet Research Agency, which is dubbed as a troll farm, and then as well some really close associates of President Vladimir Putin, one of them known as Putin's chef. He owns some of these companies, as well as the FSB and GRU, the 2 top Russian intelligence agencies. And a lot of these people were already sanctioned by the U.S., but they were also mentioned in FBI Special Counsel Robert Mueller's indictment of 13 Russians earlier this year. So these are people who are being accused of really targeting the U.S., through in the 2016 U.S. elections with this Russian meddling. So this is, the U.S. Treasury come out and saying we're sanctioning these individuals for their involvement in the Russian meddling of 2016.
What kind of impact could these sanctions actually have?
That's been debate here in Washington today. So you had, Republicans such as the House Speaker Paul Ryan saying that this was long overdue and supporting these moves. At the same time, you had others like Senator Mark Warner on the Senate Intelligence Committee say, this won't there more needs to be done. An analyst told us that, this really won't move the needle. Will this actually change Russia's, desire to target the U.S.? Because we've heard from top intelligence agencies that this year's 2018 midterm elections are a potential target again for meddling. So that's really the question of whether this is enough or it's just symbolic and enough to actually, influence Russian behavior.
Fascinating. All right. Well, thank you so much for that update, Nafisa Saeed, our Bloomberg national security reporter in Washington, D.C. We'll keep following that. Coming up, a new way to market research, and it's all about AI, how a team of street bees is connecting customers to companies next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. AT&T will face off against the Justice Department starting Monday. The DOJ is trying to block the telecom giant's $109 billion takeover of Time Warner. The government claims the merger would give AT&T an unfair advantage over competitors and cost Americans who have pay TV subscriptions an additional $436 billion per year in fees. AT&T has dismissed the government's claim as ridiculous, saying that amounts to a rise of just 45 cents per person per month. AT&T also claims the government's attempt to block the case is politically motivated. Well, when it comes to the $45 billion global market research industry, StreetBees is trying to position itself as a game changer. Instead of paying a traditional company to carry out market research, StreetBees uses its 1 million plus bees, or people across the world, to provide insights to some of the world's biggest brands, like Pepsi and L'Oreal. They've just got funding to keep the company growing. For more, let's get straight to Caroline Hyde, who is standing by in London. Caroline?
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Yes, get straight to it with StreetBees CEO. She hails from Istanbul. She now lives here in London. It's Tuğçe Bulut. Wonderful to have you here. Congratulations, of course, on sealing a funding round. How does that $12 million help artificial intelligence, building machine learning to actually build your business?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So, as you know, market research has always been traditionally done with surveys, which include like multiple choice questions. So we were basically asking people to go through 45-minute, 50-minute surveys, telling us what they want and what they need in their lives. It's not a very natural way of interacting, right? So what artificial intelligence can do, to be specific, we use NLP, natural language processing, with machine learning. We can actually stop asking people unnatural questions. Instead, we just tell them to share moments from their lives in the form of videos, photos, open text. We call this unstructured data. So all that unstructured information that comes back, rather than asking exactly people what we want to hear, thanks to artificial intelligence, we can analyze all of that and then actually tell the brands what people really want in their lives.
So there's a new platform being opened, Always On is what it is.
Yes.
And therefore, how does that make the clients that you already have, the likes of L'Oreal, PepsiCo, Unilever, use you even more?
Absolutely. So what we were still doing is that when a company needs to know something, we were asking people the next time they are making a tea or they are doing their, they are preparing their food, tell us about it. Now we are completely changing the model around. We are actually asking people, whenever it's convenient for them, to share moments from their lives. We then collect all this information that is collected always on a continuous basis, sit in a database. And then whenever a company needs to know anything about, let's say, how the birthday parties are being celebrated, we can go into this database with our machine learning solutions, and the algorithms can find out what is happening, why is it happening, what is driving that behavior, and what is likely to happen next. So with the always-on model, we can actually predict the behavior before it becomes a known trend.
To build these algorithms, you need engineers, you need AI specialists. How much are you going to be building your team? You're already a team of 75.
Yes.
Where are you expanding them?
So the main area is data science. As you can imagine, we'll be increasing our team size by like 5-fold in data science and NLP side. We are also hiring full stack engineers, data engineers as well. So we are going to be a 150 people company within the next year.
Here in the UK?
So the majority is going to be in the UK. It's our HQ, but we also have people in Lisbon as well. We have our engineers in Lisbon. We will double the size of our Lisbon office too, and we are also launching in the US now.
Lisbon's interesting because you actually opened that to ease concerns about Brexit.
A little bit. So we already had some amazing Portuguese engineers, and we wanted to give them a home in Lisbon, but we were also increasingly getting the question from our engineers around the world, who we were asking them to move to London, that they were worried if they can stay in London or not. So we said to them, don't worry, we have an office in Lisbon. Worst comes to worst, we can always shift you guys from London to the Lisbon so that they don't need to worry about that.
You now have some stellar investors. You've got the likes of Atomico, Local Globe, Octopus, to name but a few. How do these VCs and the LPs behind the venture capital, how do you ease their concerns that you can scale in the right way now? We've had some scare stories that some startups, they get too big too quickly. Sometimes ethics go out the window. How do you want to see your company scale in line with the way you'd like to see the culture continue to grow, because it helps. You're a female at the top of the food chain. Is diversity a priority?
Diversity is a priority, and we don't even call it diversity. It's the way a company should be. It's not a special thing, really. You look at the population. We have men and women. We have people from different colors and different religions. Why shouldn't a company have all of that, right? Today, what we have is we have 50% men and women in the office, which is very, unusual for a technology company. That also is reflected in our leadership team as well. And we are overrepresented in LGBT, overrepresented in black and brown populations in the company, and that is incredibly important to us. Our job as Street Bees is to understand human behavior. To be able to do that, to be able to build those algorithms, first of all, you need to have in your office all sorts of different behavior being represented.
It's been fascinating having you here. We hope that representation continues. Tuğçe, thank you very much indeed for giving up your time. That was Tuğçe, of course, from Street Bees. Emily.
All right, Caroline, thank you so much. We'll be right back with more Broadcom and Walmart versus Amazon. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I am Emily Chang. Let's briefly return to our top story. Broadcom's earnings results. Shares are under a little bit of pressure in after-hours trading after it gave a sales forecast in line with estimates. Meantime, we are monitoring the earnings call currently underway, and there are new comments on the Qualcomm acquisition. The company says that Qualcomm was a unique opportunity, but does see potential candidates for acquisitions in the future. Well, Walmart shares plunged in Thursday trade after a whistleblower claimed the retailer issued misleading e-commerce results and fired an executive who complained that the company was breaking the law. Under Chief Executive Officer Doug McMillon, Walmart has invested billions to catch up with Amazon in e-commerce. For more details, I want to bring in Matthew Boyle, who covers big box retail for Bloomberg. So what, Matt, is this whistleblower claiming happened?
Well, this whistleblower, who was hired from Amazon in 2014, his job was basically to grow this marketplace business. This is a business that Amazon also runs, where third-party vendors will sell their goods and Walmart will get a cut of the sales. This gentleman is claiming that there are improprieties in the business, that it was sort of a growth at all costs mentality, and so internal controls were overlooked. And when he brought these issues to light, he was at first ignored and then eventually fired.
He's saying they mislabeled products, so third-party vendors got lower commissions. They didn't process returns. They allowed offensive items to stay on the site. Items like what?
Items like a tranny granny costume, you asked. So there you go. A coffee mug with Hitler's name on it. I mean, just sort of really offensive, shady stuff. Now, look, this is a marketplace. You have these vendors selling all sorts of items. But the broader point is that this marketplace for Walmart has grown from only 7 million items a couple years ago to 75 million items now. So you can say, look, things could get sort of overlooked amid all that growth. But this whistleblower is claiming, that there was a sort of a persistent pattern of ignoring these issues. And when he continued to bring it to light and brought it to the company's global ethics department, he was then terminated.
What is Walmart saying about this?
Walmart is saying they're going to vigorously defend themselves. And they're saying these claims are coming from a disgruntled employee who was let go as part of a broader restructuring. And Walmart is right there. There was a broader restructuring that took place in the .com business in January of 2017 after the company had acquired Jet.com, and a lot of the Jet executives took leadership roles at Walmart. So we will see, how much credibility these guys' claims really have.
Meantime, shares barely budged today. How much is this really going to impact the business?
Well, what it does is it kind of rekindles some jitters that people are having about the .com business. You'll recall in the fourth quarter, their holiday quarter, a very important one for Walmart, their e-commerce growth slowed. People started asking questions about, all this growth on the e-commerce side, what is it really costing us? Because their profitability was certainly down, and Walmart is, very concerned about their profit margins, and their investors want to see growth there. So, their shares were down, I think, around 10% on the day they reported earnings. Yeah, they did recover today, certainly, but it does, sort of bring to light these concerns that investors have about this growth.
Let's talk a little bit more about how Walmart is actually doing in its e-commerce business vis-a-vis Amazon. Obviously, we know they bought Jet.com. We know that Mark Lohr, the CEO of Jet.com, is now running that business. How much legitimate progress has it made?
Oh, they've made quite a bit of progress. I mean, yeah, exactly. Mark has done things like institute 2-day free delivery, discounts on items, sort of so-called long tail items. And what he's done fairly recently is expand home delivery of groceries to about 100 markets, up from 6. I mean, I think food is the area where Walmart really has an advantage over Amazon. Amazon is just figuring out food right now. Walmart is the nation's biggest grocer. They know how to sell food, and they're doing a very good job of selling it online right now.
So, talk to us then about the issues that Walmart needs to iron out in the future. Whether it's, if grocery is going well, where are the biggest challenges?
I mean, some challenges are going to sort of go beyond. I mean, food, apparel is one area that Walmart has never really been known, for fashion, and they're trying to remedy that. They hired a woman from Saks to run their, online fashion business. But bottom line, I mean, and that is the thing, it's the bottom line. People want to see if this business can actually make money. We talk about the jitters. Investors were not happy to hear CEO Doug McMillon say on the fourth quarter call that the .com business could lose even more money this year. That's after they promised that last year would be the worst in terms of losses. So they still obviously, have a lot of room to grow. And with Amazon going into new areas almost daily, it really raises the bar for everyone.
All right, Bloomberg's Matt Boyle, thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to follow that lawsuit.
Thanks.
Well, BlackBerry is endorsing its CEO's turnaround plan, awarding John Chen a new contract worth at least $128 million for at least 5 years. The pay package includes 10 million restricted stock grants that will vest through November 2023. BlackBerry has exited the phone business since Chen took over in 2013. He transformed BlackBerry into a smaller, leaner, security-focused software company. Coming up, we speak to the CEO of a software startup with a long list of fans in Silicon Valley that promises to kill spreadsheets. The secret to Airtable's success next. This is Bloomberg. The biggest radio broadcaster in the United States has filed for bankruptcy protection with a last-minute creditor deal. iHeartMedia filed for Chapter 11 and has an agreement to cut its $20 billion debt load by more than half. iHeart owns about 850 radio stations. Newer media like Spotify and SiriusXM have cut into the company's ad sales. The software startup Airtable has become a sleeper hit among businesses and individuals alike, with customers as big as Tesla, WeWork, and Airbnb. And it is aiming to take on Microsoft, Google, and even Apple. The company was about to announce raising $25 million in new funding a week ago, and within days that doubled. This week, Airtable announced it is raising $52 million in its latest funding round. Let's bring in Howie Liu, CEO of Airtable. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So what is so groundbreaking about your technology?
Yeah, so if I could make a quick correction, the round was led by CRV and Caffeinated Capital. But I think what really sets us apart is that we don't see ourselves as a productivity tool or even a replacement for Microsoft Office. But really, I mean, we think that there's this profound gap today between the experience that really technologists and software creators have with software, which is to see it really as this medium, and they can meld it and create lots of value with it. And then, everybody else kind of gets this push button experience, where they get basically the consumption experience of apps that have already been made. And so we really see Airtable as this platform that enables everybody in the world to really kind of stick their hands into the machine and create their own useful apps.
So I've heard it called the spreadsheet killer. Is this a threat to Microsoft Excel, Google Docs? And can you really kill spreadsheets?
Yeah, so I think spreadsheets have two different, very wildly dichotomous use cases today. And one is numerical, kind of number crunching, a lot of financial analyst use cases. And I think the other is really where people are creating makeshift databases. And whether that's a small business keeping track of their inventory or customers, contacts, we really think that on the latter side, they're a pretty suboptimal experience, and that with Airtable, we can modernize that entire collaboration and structured kind of data workflow.
So are you challenging Microsoft? Are you challenging Google?
I think in a sense, yes. At the same time, I think the broader opportunity is even beyond, kind of taking existing spreadsheet use cases and replacing them, and actually more to, open up this new frontier of possibilities where, companies can go and build enormously sophisticated workflows without having to program or without having to wait for an IT department to come and actually instrument software for them.
Let's talk about that. Airtable is part of this. They call it the low code or the no code movement. And I don't want to get too technical, but this is something that even Amazon is secretly working on. And it basically means you can make your own apps with less experience, right?
Yes.
What is so disruptive about that?
So I think what really happens here is that when you think about the software used by either companies or individuals, you have this sort of rock and a hard place choice where either you get an app that's very, very structured but inflexible, or you end up using a very, very lightweight kind of simplistic either spreadsheet or ad hoc project management tool. And I think what's really, really powerful is that these different products and certainly us are coming into this massive void in between and trying to offer people this kind of bridge between that divide. So, the structure of building a real app, but at the same time, not all of the complexity and expensive kind of effort that usually goes into it.
You've been working in enterprise for a long time, and so you worked at Salesforce. I'm curious for your thoughts on the bigger enterprise tech landscape. So, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're all fighting for the cloud. Salesforce, Oracle, they're fighting for a different piece of the cloud. Who ends up on top?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting place to be in, especially with our space, because I do think that this is a place where you'll actually see this intersection of interests and ambitions between Salesforce and some of the other enterprise companies, but then also companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, which have historically been a little bit more kind of mass scale and mass oriented, in that we really see this as almost the next frontier for cloud computing. So you had, of course, the pioneering innovations of the original kind of cloud computing platforms. AWS offering EC2 really just kind of abstracted away this hardware level. And then subsequently, there were many other kind of progressive abstractions that took away more of that complexity. But really where this becomes interesting for Salesforce and Microsoft alike is that we see this as the next leap where you no longer even have to think about the software code that goes into a business app or even a prosumer app workflow. And instead, we create this layer of abstraction where business end users can come in and just directly create their own apps in a cloud environment.
So, and we've been seeing a lot of partnerships between companies that are actually, in fact, competitors. What does that mean for who owns the cloud? Does Amazon maintain its dramatic lead? Does the cloud just get bigger and a lot of different companies own the piece for it? I mean, I realize it's not necessarily a zero-sum game, but, who ultimately owns the cloud?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can't purport to have a 100% accurate answer on. But my bet is that I think the entire space will just grow by leaps and bounds. I mean, a lot of the use cases that we're seeing firsthand being built on Airtable, so for instance, multiple major Fortune 500 retailers creating entire back office sort of operation workflows on top of Airtable, they're entirely net new, or rather, they're replacing a lot of very ad hoc systems or creating new levels of transparency in this sort of application they've built that wasn't there before. So, it's not necessarily so much that we're coming in and directly competing with, say, Google Cloud Platform or AWS, or that they're necessarily even going to have to compete directly, against each other in this new space, but rather that I think an entirely new kind of category of value will be created for certainly businesses and then also individuals.
Do you think we'll see more M&A, and is Airtable, one of those targets?
Yeah, so we are not at all interested in acquisition. I mean, we think that the possibility possibility here is a sort of once in a lifetime, or at least once in a decade opportunity to really kind of become the next great company. And I think there's a great parallel that we see between the early days of computing and sort of what Apple and Microsoft did for personal computing with the Windows and Macintosh GUIs to here where we're sort of democratizing software creation.
So I do want to touch a little bit on your story. You were part of Y Combinator in 2010. Ashton Kutcher was there on demo day when you presented. He invested in your company. You got bought by Salesforce a year later. It sounds like the quintessential Silicon Valley story. Is it really that easy?
I think I was very fortunate to have so many factors going for me, both at that time and then even if you look at the 2 decades I was alive before then. So I never, I would never say that it's an easy journey. And I think, if you think it is, it's sort of a lack of awareness of a lot of the factors that, I've benefited from, whether, kind of tacitly or explicitly. And so I don't think it's easy. I mean, I think we put in a lot of hard work, but we also benefited a lot from, just sort of a foundational element that we had going for us.
So, I'm very interested in diversity. I wrote a whole book on women in tech. What is your advice to founders who come from other backgrounds who want to make it here?
For sure. I mean, I think the first thing is it's really, really important to just be an avid consumer of knowledge. And so, for instance, there are a lot of great both online and digital as well as human resources to learn from. And I think it is going to be a challenge to try to get people, if you cold email a lot of existing founders and ask them for advice, frankly, it's tough to sometimes get the attention of the really busy people. But I do think that perseverance, while it's not a silver bullet and certainly can't completely, reverse a lot of the systemic disparities out there, I think are sort of, one way that entrepreneurs can break into the valley.
All right, Howie Liu, CEO of Airtable, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Stopping by. Great to have you. Coming up, Snap drops amid an uproar over an ad making light of Rihanna and her history with domestic violence. We will discuss next. This is Bloomberg. Spotify begins trading April 3rd on the New York Stock Exchange. The music streaming company announced the timing at an Investor Day event today to introduce the company to investors. Now remember, Spotify is skipping the traditional roadshow meeting and media interviews, and its first public market valuation will be set before the stock lists based on the shares investors want to sell, demand, and the price agreed on by the parties. Well, Snap is on a losing streak with celebrities. Pop singer Rihanna now criticizing the company for running an ad that asked users to decide whether they wanted to slap her or punch Chris Brown, saying it made a joke of her history as a victim of domestic violence. Snapchat removed the ad, which was for a mobile game called Would You Rather, and apologized, saying it was a mistake. After Rihanna's comments, the LA-based company responded further, calling the promotion disgusting. Snap stocks fell almost 5%. Joining us now, Bloomberg Tech, Sarah Fryer. I am so angry even as I read that. How did that happen?
So Snap has been transitioning to an automated ad sales system. So earlier on in its business model, it had more of a direct sales relationship with advertisers. Now, really any business can buy a Snap ad. They're adding more and more every day. This was supposed to be reviewed, or it was reviewed by human checkpoint that would look at it and say, is this following our rules or is it not? Someone said, yes, this ad is fine, it follows our rules, put a stamp of approval on it, let it run. And Snap, once they found out, there was uproar over the weekend, once they found out that this ad was circulating, they revisited that decision and said, of course it doesn't follow our rules, this is disgusting, we don't like this ad. They took it down. But of course Rihanna noticed, everyone noticed, now there are calls to boycott the app. It's getting very heated.
Snap shares plunged. It's very reminiscent of what happened with Kylie Jenner when she, said that basically she doesn't use Snap anymore. Rihanna said in a statement, all the women, children, and men that have been victims of domestic violence in the past, and especially the ones who haven't made it out yet, you let us know. Shame on you. Throw the whole apology away. You let us down, excuse me. Shame on you. Throw the whole apology away. She didn't specifically ask users to delete the app, but I saw a user saying, if she tells me to delete it, I will.
Right.
It's not good for Snap.
It's not good. I mean, this this is the position that they're in. They are the app that has this relationship with a younger audience that advertisers want to reach. That's why people want to spend money on Snap ads. But if they are losing faith among celebrities like Kylie Jenner, like Rihanna, because of silly mistakes like this, Kylie was actually complaining about their redesign, which is another big move they made earlier this year. That is going to chip away at people's confidence that this app is going to reach younger users. Now, there's a larger problem in the industry that Facebook has also faced about how hard it is to really make sure that these automated ad systems don't churn out bad ads. It's hard to review all of them. As the business gets bigger, it'll be even harder. And Facebook's had problem in the past with racist ads or ads targeting people who are anti-Semites on their platform. And they've tried to fix those problems, but this is just going to continue to be there for Snap as an issue.
So, okay, I guess we have to leave it there. Producer just told me, Jackie, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for weighing in on that. We'll continue to follow how they combat stuff like this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Sarah Fryer, our Bloomberg tech reporter who covers Snap, thank you. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we're live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.